Blood soaked through the surgical gown, warm and sticky against my scrubs. Not my blood. The golden retrievers. 12 hours of emergency after emergency, and this last one had been touch and go. Internal bleeding from a hit and run. The dog made it. Barely. I stripped off the gown and tossed it in the biohazard bin, my hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline crash. 2:17 in the morning. The clock on the wall mocked me with each tick. I was 28 years old and this was my life. Night shifts at an emergency animal clinic, surviving on coffee and spite, trying to outrun debt I'd never catch up to. The locker room was empty. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. I changed out of my scrubs, pulled on jeans and a sweater that smelled faintly of antiseptic no matter how many times I washed it. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow. Dark circles under green eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun. I looked older than I was. Felt it too. The parking lot was a lake. Rain hammered down so hard I could barely see my car through the glass doors. Of course, because tonight hadn't been brutal already. I pulled my jacket tighter and ran for it. Water soaked through my shoes in seconds. The cold bit at my ankles as I fumbled with my keys, hands clumsy with fatigue. My ancient Honda sat alone in the far corner where I always parked it, away from the nice cars, away from the risk of door dings I couldn't afford to fix. The envelope. God, the envelope. It sat on my passenger seat where I'd left it this morning. Red. Bright crimson red with final notice printed across the front. Rent was due 3 days ago. My landlord had been patient until he wasn't. And the student loan payment I'd deferred twice already. The interest compounding, drowning me slowly. I started the engine. The wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour. Visibility was maybe 10 feet. Maybe. But I lived 20 minutes away, and every minute I sat here was another minute I wasn't in bed, wasn't unconscious, wasn't thinking about the golden retriever's owner crying while I operated, or the stack of bills on my kitchen counter, or the fact that both my parents were dead, and I was completely alone in this. The streets were abandoned. Just me and the rain, and the red glare of traffic lights reflecting off wet asphalt. I should have called an Uber, should have waited it out. But I was so tired. Tired of being careful. Tired of being responsible. Tired of everything. The light ahead turned yellow. I slowed. My brain felt stuffed with cotton. Thoughts moving through molasses. The envelope crinkled as I shifted in my seat. $1,200 for rent. $300 for the loan payment. Not counting groceries or gas or the phone bill or... The SUV appeared out of nowhere. Black. Massive. Just sitting there in the middle of the intersection, even though the light was green now. No brake lights, no signal, nothing. Just stopped. I slammed the brakes. My tires screamed against wet pavement. The Honda fishtailed. I felt that sick lurch in my stomach, the certainty of impact, the complete loss of control. Metal crunched, glass shattered. My head snapped forward and back. The airbag exploded into my face with the smell of chemicals and powder. Then silence. Just the rain drumming on the roof and the hiss of my destroyed radiator. I sat there stunned, breathing hard, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. My hands were still locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The airbag deflated slowly, leaving my face stinging. The SUV hadn't moved. I'd hit it square in the rear bumper. My entire front end was crumpled like paper. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh God. I fumbled for my seatbelt with numb fingers. The door wouldn't open. Jammed. I had to throw my shoulder against it twice before it gave way. Rain soaked me instantly as I stumbled out onto the street. "I'm so sorry," I called out, my voice cracking. "I didn't see you, the rain, I'm so..." The driver's door of the SUV opened. A man stepped out. Tall, maybe 6'2". Dark suit despite the hour, despite the weather. No umbrella. He stood in the downpour like it wasn't even happening, water streaming down his face, his dark hair slicked back. Then I saw his eyes. Light brown, almost amber in the streetlight. Cold, assessing. The kind of eyes that saw everything and forgot nothing. Behind him, Another vehicle materialized from the darkness. I hadn't even noticed it. Another black SUV. Men emerged, 3 of them, also in suits, also moving with that peculiar grace that said they were used to violence. Ice flooded my veins. "I'm sorry," I said again, hating how my voice shook. "My insurance will cover—" "Stay there." His voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of quiet that was more terrifying than shouting. An accent underneath the words. Italian, maybe. He walked toward my crumpled Honda without hurrying. Water splashed under his expensive shoes. He crouched down near the front, examining the damage with the focus of a surgeon. Then his gaze swept the interior through the broken windshield. I watched him take inventory. The coffee cups. The scrubs I'd tossed in the back. The stack of medical journals on the passenger floor. My wallet. It must have fallen during impact. It lay on the asphalt, splayed open. My license visible in the glow of the headlights. He picked it up. Studied it. His thumb traced over my address with careful precision. Amanda Wells. He read my name like he was memorizing it. 28, Oregon Street, veterinarian. His eyes flicked to my bloody sleeve. Long shift? I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. One of his men approached, murmured something I couldn't hear. The man in charge, the one holding my wallet, my entire life in his hands, nodded once. "Is anyone hurt?" I managed. "I can call an ambulance. I'm medical." "No ambulance." He stood, pocketing my license. "Just taking it. Your car is totaled." "I know. I'll call a tow. My men will handle it." He gestured, and one of them moved immediately toward my Honda. "You need a ride." No, I'll call someone. I can—" "You'll get in the car." "Not a request." His hand swept toward the undamaged SUV. "It's 2:30 in the morning. You're exhausted. You'll make another mistake." Terror and exhaustion, and something else I couldn't name, warred in my chest. He was right about the exhaustion. Right about the danger. But getting into a car with him felt like a different kind of danger entirely. "Who are you?" Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. Or recognition that I'd asked a question I wouldn't like the answer to. "Christopher Pellegrini." He said it like I should know. Like everyone should know. "Get in the car, Amanda." My name in his mouth sounded like ownership. I got in the car. The interior was leather and luxury I'd never experienced. Soundproofed. The rain became a distant whisper. Christopher slid in beside me. Not close, but close in a vehicle designed to seat 6. The scent of him filled the space. Cedar. Something sharper underneath. Clean but dangerous. His driver pulled away from the wreckage without being asked. I twisted to look back at my Honda, at my entire miserable life sitting in the middle of that intersection, and felt something break in my chest. "Where do you live?" Christopher's voice pulled me back. "Oregon Street. Apartment 3B. The address he'd already stolen from my license. He made no comment on the neighborhood. Didn't need to. We both knew it was rough. The kind of place where sirens were background noise and you didn't make eye contact in the hallways. The drive took less than 10 minutes. Christopher stared out the window the entire time, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights, that scar on his chin catching shadow and light. I should have said something. Should have asked what would happen next. If insurance would cover his damage. Why he'd taken my license. But exhaustion was winning. The adrenaline was wearing off. I was 28 years old, orphaned at 19, drowning in debt, and I'd just rear-ended someone who looked like he could make me disappear with a phone call. The SUV stopped outside my building. Christopher turned to face me fully for the first time. Those amber eyes cataloged every detail of my face. "You owe me now, Amanda." His tone was casual, conversational, absolutely terrifying. "I'll decide when and how you repay that debt. The insurance, this has nothing to do with insurance." He reached across me, close to open my door. His arm brushed mine. "Go inside. Lock your door. Don't make me regret letting you walk away tonight." I scrambled out into the rain. The SUV was gone before I reached my building's entrance. I stood there dripping, shaking, watching the taillights disappear into darkness. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, chained it. Then I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and searched Christopher Pellegrini. The results made my blood freeze. Pellegrini family, import business, construction contracts, waterfront property. And underneath all the legitimate-sounding descriptions, the truth everyone knew but no one said. Organized crime. 3 generations of power built on violence and control. I just hit the car of a man who owned half this city, and he knew exactly where I lived. 3 days. I lasted 3 days before he came back. The clinic was quiet at 2 a.m, just me and Dr. Reeves handling overnight emergencies, a cat with a urinary blockage, a beagle that ate chocolate, normal problems, fixable problems, problems that didn't involve men who could make people disappear. I'd been useless since the accident, jumping at shadows, checking over my shoulder. My car sat in some impound lot somewhere, totaled, and I'd been taking the bus to work. 3 transfers, 2 hours each way. But I couldn't afford a new car, and Christopher Pellegrini still had my license. The door chimed. I looked up from inventory sheets, expecting maybe a panicked pet owner. Instead, I got him. Christopher walked in carrying a Doberman that was bleeding all over his shirt. The dog's breathing was shallow, rapid. Its eyes rolled back in pain. Blood matted the black fur along its ribcage. Back room. Now. His voice had that same controlled quiet, the kind that made disobeying impossible. I didn't think. Training kicked in. I grabbed a gurney and wheeled it over. The Doberman whimpered as Christopher laid it down with surprising gentleness. His hands came away red. What happened? I was already moving, rolling the dog into surgical prep, assessing vitals. Gunshot. 20 minutes ago. No police. No records. My hands froze on the stethoscope. I looked at him. Really looked. His white shirt was ruined. Blood spatter across his jaw. But his eyes were calm, expectant, like this was perfectly normal. I need to report gunshot wounds. It's protocol. You need to save my dog. He stepped closer, not threatening. Worse, certain. Everything else is negotiable. The Doberman's breathing hitched. Lung puncture, maybe. Internal bleeding, definitely. This animal would die if I stood here arguing. Wait outside. I'm staying. Of course he was. I prepped for surgery while trying to ignore the fact that a crime boss was watching me scrub in. The bullet had entered below the ribcage, missed major organs by centimeters. Lucky. Or maybe whoever shot at him had bad aim. I worked fast. Located the bullet. Extracted it. Repaired the damage. Christopher stood against the wall the entire time. Silent as stone, but I felt his attention, the weight of it. Like every movement I made was being catalogued, judged. The Doberman would live. I stitched the last layer and finally allowed myself to breathe. He'll need antibiotics, pain management, someone to monitor him for the next 48 hours. You'll do it. I pulled off my surgical gloves with more force than necessary. I have a job, scheduled shifts. I can't just, I'll pay you. This isn't about money. Everything is about money, Amanda. He produced a wallet. Counted out bills without looking. Hundreds. So many hundreds. He set the stack on the counter between us. For tonight. For your silence. For understanding that some things are better left unquestioned. I stared at the money. Rent was due again in 2 weeks. The student loan company had called 4 times yesterday. That stack would cover both. Maybe even groceries that weren't ramen. I can't accept this. You already did. He was at the door before I could respond. When you operated without calling the police. When you saved Zeus instead of protecting yourself. You made a choice, Amanda. Now you live with it. Zeus. He'd named the dog Zeus. You said I owed you a debt. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Is this it? Is this how I pay you back? Christopher paused, his hand on the door. A smile ghosted across his mouth. Not kind. Knowing. This is how you go deeper. The debt compounds. He glanced back at the Doberman, at Zeus, unconscious but stable on the table. I'll send someone for him tomorrow night. Take good care of my dog, Amanda. I'd hate for anything to happen that might make me disappointed. Then he was gone. Just like that, leaving me with a gunshot Doberman, a stack of cash, and the growing certainty that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Dr. Reeves found me an hour later, still standing in the surgical suite, staring at the money like it might bite. You okay? She was 60, had seen everything twice. Her eyes went to the cash, to Zeus, back to me. Amanda? Emergency walk-in, paid in advance. The lie tasted sour. I'm keeping the dog overnight for observation. She didn't believe me. I could see it. But she also didn't push. That's what working overnight emergency veterinary medicine taught you. Sometimes you didn't ask questions. Sometimes you just cleaned up blood and moved forward. I stayed with Zeus through the night, monitored his vitals, changed his IV, stroked his head when he started to wake, confused and hurting. He had kind eyes, trusting, the kind of dog that loved completely, no questions asked, unlike his owner. By morning, Zeus was stable, alert, even attempting to wag his tail when I brought food. I should have been relieved, should have called whoever Christopher sent to collect him and washed my hands of this entire situation. Instead, I counted the money, used half to pay my landlord, put the rest toward the minimum payment on my loans, the first payment I'd made on time in 6 months. It felt like signing a contract in blood. The car appeared the next morning. I walked out of my apartment building headed for the bus stop, and there it was. My Honda. Perfectly repaired. Better than repaired. The dent in the passenger door I'd been living with for a year? Gone. The cracked windshield? Replaced. New paint. New tires. A key sat on the dashboard, just sitting there, like it had always been mine. I stood on the sidewalk, staring. Pedestrians flowed around me. Morning traffic rumbled past. The world kept turning while mine tilted sideways. He'd fixed my car. Not just fixed, improved. And he'd known exactly where I lived, where I parked, how to access it without me noticing. There was no note, no message, just the car, and the understanding that I now owed him twice over. I drove to work in silence, hands shaking on the wheel. The interior still smelled new, factory fresh, expensive. Nothing like the stale coffee and old upholstery I'd grown used to. A week passed. Zeus went home with a man who didn't give his name, just handed me a card with a phone number. Christopher's number, I assumed. I didn't call it. Didn't need to. He knew where to find me. The men came on a Tuesday. 2 of them. Tall, broad, with accents that turned their English harsh and clipped. Eastern European. Russian, maybe. They walked into the clinic during my shift like they owned it. Looked around with slow, deliberate attention. One of them smiled at me. All teeth. No warmth. "We're looking for someone," he said. "Christopher Pellegrini. You know this name, yes." Every instinct screamed danger. These weren't Christopher's men. The energy was wrong. Predatory in a different way. "No." The lie came easily. Surprisingly easily. "I don't know who that is." The man's smile widened. "You sure? This clinic. We hear interesting things about this clinic. About Doberman with bullet wound. About woman who asks no questions." My blood turned to ice. "I see a lot of animals. Can't remember every case." "No?" He leaned against the counter. Casual, conversational, terrifying. "Is shame. Because man we're looking for, he caused trouble for a lot of people. And people who help him?" He made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. "They have trouble too." The other man was looking at the surgical suite door, at the files, at everything. Memorizing. "I can't help you." My voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. "Now, if you're not here for veterinary services, I'll have to ask you to leave." They left, but slowly, taking their time, making sure I understood this wasn't over. I locked the door behind them with trembling hands, called Dr. Reeves, made up an excuse about feeling sick, left an hour early through the back exit. The gray sedan appeared 3 blocks from my apartment, following just far enough back to be noticed, wanting to be noticed. A message, a threat, a promise. I'd thought I understood fear when I was 19 and orphaned, when the hospital called to say my parents were dead, when I realized I was completely alone. This was different. This was the kind of fear that had teeth, that followed you home, that waited outside your door while you lay awake wondering if tonight was the night someone decided you knew too much. I'd saved a dog and taken blood money, and now I was marked. 2 weeks after rear-ending Christopher Pellegrini's SUV, I came home to find my apartment door already open. Not kicked in, just open. The lock intact, like someone had used a key. My key. I should have run. Should have called the police from the hallway. Instead, I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Paint. Fresh and acrid. Then I saw the wall. Red letters. Dripping slightly where whoever had done this had used too much. The message was simple. Direct. Stay away from Pellegrini, or we finish this. My photographs were scattered across the floor. Every single one torn precisely down the middle. Me at graduation. Me with my parents before they died. Me holding a rescued kitten from last year. All of them destroyed with methodical care. My hands went numb. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered on the hardwood. Someone had been here, in my space, touching my things, leaving threats on my walls. The police took 40 minutes to arrive. 2 officers who looked bored before they even crossed the threshold. They took photos, asked questions I couldn't answer coherently, told me to change my locks and get a security system I couldn't afford. Probably just kids, the older one said, scratching notes on a pad that would go nowhere. Vandalism's up in this neighborhood. You should consider moving somewhere safer. They left me with a case number and zero comfort. I was sitting on my couch, staring at the ruined wall, when Christopher arrived. He didn't knock, just walked in like he owned the building. 3 men flanked him, all wearing the same dark suits, the same alert expressions. One immediately started photographing everything. Another began checking the windows. Christopher stood in the center of my destroyed living room, amber eyes cataloging every detail. His jaw was tight. A muscle jumped beneath the scar on his chin. How did you know? My voice sounded distant. Disconnected. I have people watching. He moved to the wall, studying the paint. Not well, apparently, since they didn't stop this. You've been watching me? He turned. You became my responsibility the moment you saved Zeus. Did you think those men who came to your clinic were selling Girl Scout cookies? The memory crashed back. The Russians with their sharp smiles and sharper questions. The gray sedan that had followed me home. Bakiri. Christopher said the name like a curse. Albanian syndicate. They want territory I control. Have wanted it for 6 months. Your leverage now. A pressure point. I thought back to the men in the clinic. My sleep-starved brain had filed their vowels under Russian, maybe. I'd been wrong. Close enough to be dangerous. Wrong enough to miss how far this reached. Because I operated on your dog? Hysteria bubbled up. I'm a veterinarian. I'm nobody. I don't know anything about your business, about territories, about... You know me. He stepped closer. That's all that matters to them. They'll use you to get to me, hurt you to hurt me, kill you to send a message. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the couch. The police are useless. No hesitation. Just fact. Bakiri own half the precincts in this city. The report you filed, it's already buried. The next morning I called the precinct with my case number. No record under that file, the clerk said after a too long pause. Internal Affairs never returned my email. By the end of the week, even the building camera request had gone missing. The message was clear. Whatever this was, I'd been erased before I finished spelling my name. Those officers who took your statement? They'll forget your name by morning. I looked at my shredded photographs. At the wall screaming threats in red paint. What am I supposed to do? Pack. Christopher gestured to one of his men. You have 2 hours. Essentials only. You're moving. Moving where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. He crouched down to my level, forcing eye contact. This isn't negotiable, Amanda. You stay here, you die. Probably slowly. Definitely painfully. They'll make sure I know about it. I have a job. I have a life. You have a target on your back. His voice went soft. Dangerous. And you put it there the moment you chose not to turn me in. The moment you took my money. The moment you lied to those men about knowing me. You're in this now. All the way. He was right. I hated that he was right. But the alternative was pretending I was safe. Pretending those men wouldn't come back. Pretending the red paint on my wall wasn't a countdown to violence. I packed in a daze. Clothes, toiletries, the few photographs that weren't destroyed. Christopher's men moved through my apartment like ghosts, checking for bugs, for cameras, for evidence of how deep the breach went. The drive took 30 minutes into the suburbs I'd only seen from the highway. Houses gave way to estates. Estates gave way to compounds hidden behind walls and gates. Christopher's property made my entire apartment building look like a garden shed. Stone walls, 12 feet high. Cameras every 20 yards. Men in casual clothes with radio earpieces positioned at intervals that looked random but definitely weren't. The gate required a code, a fingerprint scan, and visual confirmation before it would open. The house itself was modern. All clean lines and dark wood and windows that were definitely bulletproof. It sprawled across manicured grounds, 3 stories of controlled luxury that screamed both wealth and fortress. West wing. Christopher led me through a foyer with ceilings that soared. 3rd door. Your suite, private bathroom, lock from the inside if it makes you feel better. The suite was bigger than my entire apartment. King bed, sitting area, bathroom with a soaking tub. Everything in shades of cream and soft gray. Beautiful. Sterile. A gilded cage. I can't live here. You'll adjust. Christopher set my bag down. Rules are simple. You don't leave without escort. You don't tell anyone where you are. You don't make contact with anyone I haven't cleared. You work your scheduled shifts. My men drive you. They wait. They bring you back. What am I? A prisoner? You're alive. He moved to the door. That's more than you'd be if I left you in that apartment. Remember that when you start feeling trapped. The first week was suffocating. I woke in that enormous bed disoriented every morning. Went to work with a silent man named Frank, who drove like every intersection might hide assassins. Worked my shifts while he waited in the parking lot. Came back to the mansion and retreated to my suite like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Dr. Reeves noticed. You look exhausted. Everything okay at home? Renovation issues. The lie tasted sour. Staying with a friend until it's done. She didn't push. I was grateful. Christopher was rarely there. I'd see him in passing, coming back late, leaving early, always in those dark suits, always with that contained energy that suggested violence held on a leash. We didn't speak, didn't need to. The house staff treated me with careful courtesy, like I was something fragile, something temporary. Zeus found me on day 5. The Doberman appeared in the hallway while I was wandering, restless and trapped. He limped slightly still, healing from the gunshot wound I'd repaired, but his tail wagged when he saw me. Recognition. Joy. I sat down on the marble floor and he came immediately, pressing his head against my chest. I buried my fingers in his fur and finally, let myself cry. For my destroyed apartment. For the life I'd lost. For the debt I could never repay. When I looked up, Christopher was standing at the end of the hall, watching. His expression unreadable in the low light. He remembers you, Christopher said quietly. Dogs don't forget kindness. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Zeus licked my face, and Christopher turned away, leaving me alone with the only creature in this fortress who didn't see me as a problem to be solved. 1 month into living at Christopher's estate, I'd learned the architecture of his life through sounds and silence, the low rumble of engines arriving at odd hours, murmured conversations in rooms I wasn't invited to enter, the particular cadence of his footsteps on marble floors. Confident, measured, nothing wasted. I could tell his mood by how he closed doors. Soft clicks meant control intact. Slams meant something had gone wrong in his world of shadows and violence. I learned he preferred whiskey, not the cheap stuff I'd bought on sale. Crystal decanters filled with amber liquid that probably cost more than my entire liquor cabinet had. He drank it neat. No ice, no water, just burning clarity in a glass he'd hold for minutes before actually drinking. I learned he read constantly. Books in what I eventually confirmed was Italian. Leather-bound volumes he'd touch with reverence, he showed nothing else. He'd sit in the library with Zeus at his feet, completely absorbed. And in those moments, he looked younger, less like a man carrying the weight of blood and legacy. I learned he barely slept. Some nights I'd wake at 3 a.m. and see light bleeding under his study door. Other nights I'd hear him pacing, back and forth, the rhythm of a caged predator trying to remember what freedom felt like. Once, around 4 a.m, I heard him shout, not at anyone, just a raw sound torn from somewhere deep. Nightmares, maybe, or the past refusing to stay buried. I lay in my enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what demons chased a man like Christopher Pellegrini through darkness. We never spoke about it. That was our unspoken agreement. He didn't ask why I sometimes took showers at 2 a.m. just to cry where no one could hear. I didn't ask what made him scream into emptiness. We existed in parallel universes under the same roof. Zeus became my lifeline. The Doberman followed me everywhere when I was home. Kitchen, where staff prepared meals I barely touched. Library, where I'd lose myself in books that weren't mine. Gardens where security cameras tracked my every movement. But at least I could feel sky overhead. Zeus didn't care about debts or danger, or the fact that I was essentially a prisoner in paradise. He just pressed his massive head against my leg and asked for attention with those soulful eyes. I'd sit on the ground and let him lean his full weight into me, and for those moments I felt less alone. Christopher noticed. He always noticed everything. I'd catch him watching me with Zeus, something unreadable flickering across his face before he'd deliberately turn away, like witnessing that connection hurt somehow. The dinners were torture disguised as civility. The house staff insisted on serving meals in the formal dining room when Christopher was home. 20-foot table, 18 chairs. Just the two of us at opposite ends like strangers pretending at normalcy. "You can eat in your room if you prefer," Christopher said one evening, cutting into perfectly prepared steak with surgical precision. "No one requires your presence here." I pushed food around my plate. Expensive food I couldn't taste past the anxiety coating my tongue. I'm not hiding in my room like a child. Most people find meals with me uncomfortable. I'm not afraid of you. His knife paused mid-cut. Those amber eyes lifted to mine. Held. Assessed. "You should be. Most people are." Well, I'm not most people. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. Or recognition. "No. You're definitely not." The tension between us was becoming impossible to ignore. Little moments that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. His hand brushing mine when he passed the salt shaker. The way his gaze would linger when he thought I wasn't looking. How we'd both reach for the coffee pot at the same time during breakfast and freeze, too close, breathing the same air before one of us would retreat. It was dangerous. I knew it was dangerous with the same certainty I knew fire burned. He was 35 years old and had built an empire on violence. I was 28 and drowning in a world where morality had different definitions. But knowledge didn't stop the wanting. Didn't stop my heart from racing when he entered a room. Didn't stop me from lying awake imagining what his hands would feel like on my skin. 3 weeks into this impossible situation, he finally explained the war properly. We were in his study. He'd summoned me there after dinner with a simple, "We need to talk." My stomach had dropped, but he just gestured to the leather chair across from his desk and poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if I wanted one. "The men who came to your clinic," he started without preamble, "they're Bakiri. Albanian syndicate that's been pushing into territory my family has controlled for 3 generations. I accepted the glass he offered. The whiskey burned going down, but I was grateful for it. Why target me? Because they're smart. They know direct confrontation with me costs more than they can afford, so they look for pressure points. He leaned against his desk, close but not crowding. 2 of my dock workers were killed last month. Good men. Men with families who depended on them. Bakiri sent pieces of them back to their wives. Bile rose in my throat. God. There is no God in my world, Amanda. Just power and those who take it. His voice was matter-of-fact, stating reality, not philosophy. They marked you because I showed interest, fixed your car, visited your clinic multiple times. In my world, that signals value, and value becomes leverage. So this is because you were nice to me. The absurdity stung. I'm in danger because you paid for car repairs? You're in danger because you existed near me. Because you made choices that tied you to me whether you understood the consequences or not. He swirled the whiskey in his glass. You saved Zeus. You lied to protect me. You accepted my money. Each choice was a thread weaving you deeper into this web. Then cut me loose. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Let me go back to my life. I'll tell them I don't know you. I'll disappear. They'd kill you within a week. No hesitation. Just certainty. You know too much now. You've been here. You've seen my home, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Bakiri would torture you for information you don't even realize you have, then kill you just to hurt me. The glass trembled in my hand. So I'm just trapped here forever? Until the war ends. He drained his whiskey in one swallow. Set the glass down with deliberate care. One way or another, it will end. But until then, yes. You're trapped. I'm sorry for that. Genuinely sorry. But not sorry it means keeping you alive. Thunder rumbled outside. I hadn't noticed the storm building. Rain began hitting the windows with increasing intensity, nature matching the turmoil inside. Tell me about your brother. Christopher's entire body went rigid. What? You mentioned him once. That you lost someone. That it's why you can't let me go. I met his gaze directly. Tell me about him. For a long moment I thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd dismiss me back to my suite and return to whatever isolation he preferred. Instead, he refilled both our glasses. Luca was 22, youngest of 3 brothers. He was supposed to go to law school, supposed to be the legitimate face of the family business. Christopher's voice went flat, emotionless in a way that screamed of pain buried deep. He trusted someone he shouldn't have. A friend, someone we thought was loyal. That friend sold him to our enemies for $50,000 and a promise of protection. What happened? They took 3 days to kill him. Made sure we knew every second of it. By the time we found his body, he was unrecognizable. Christopher's hands flexed around his glass. I was 27, supposed to be protecting him. Instead, I was so focused on expanding territory, on proving myself worthy of leadership, that I missed the thread inside our own organization. The grief in his voice was raw, ancient but still bleeding. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He finally looked at me. I should have seen it. Should have known. Should have protected what mattered instead of chasing power I already had. After Luca died, I swore I'd never care about anyone outside this life again. Never give enemies that kind of opening. Never fail to protect someone again. But you climbed out of a wrecked car and apologized for the accident even though you were terrified. You saved Zeus without asking questions. You looked at me like I was human instead of monster. His voice dropped. And now I can't stop thinking about what happens when this ends. When you leave. When I have to watch you walk away because keeping you means destroying you. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought he'd hear it. What do you want from me, Christopher? The question hung between us. Heavy, dangerous, inevitable. He closed the distance in 2 strides, crowded me against the bookshelf without actually touching. So close I could feel heat radiating from him. Smell cedar and whiskey and something darker underneath. Want. Need. Hunger held on the thinnest leash. Things you shouldn't give. He murmured, voice rough. Things that would destroy what little goodness you have left. Things that would mark you as mine in ways you can't imagine and tie you to this world forever. I'm not fragile. My hands fisted in my lap to keep from reaching for him. I'm not going to break. You say that now, but you don't understand what being mine actually means. The violence, the paranoia, looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, knowing that enemies will always see you as the easiest way to hurt me. His hand came up slowly, cupped my face with surprising gentleness. You deserve better than that. Better than me. Maybe I don't want better. Maybe I'm tired of safe and empty and alone. The truth spilled out. My parents died when I was 19. Car accident. Drunk driver crossed the center line. I was in my 2nd year of nursing school. Suddenly I was completely alone with debt and grief, and no clue how to survive it. Christopher's thumb traced my cheekbone. Barely touching. Devastating anyway. I've been surviving ever since. Just surviving. Working 80-hour weeks until I'm numb. Existing instead of living. Going through motions because stopping means facing how hollow everything became. I met his eyes. You want to know why I'm not running? Because at least here, even trapped, even scared, I feel something real. Even if it's wrong, even if it ends badly, at least I'm not just surviving anymore. Amanda. My name in his mouth sounded like prayer and curse combined. Tell me you don't feel this too. Tell me I'm imagining it and I'll go back to my room and we can pretend this conversation never happened. I can't. His forehead pressed against mine. God help me, I can't. He kissed me like a man drowning, like I was air and salvation and damnation all at once. Soft at first, questioning, then deeper when I responded, my hands finally giving in and fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, closing any distance remaining between us. He tasted like whiskey and want and decisions we'd both regret. His hand stayed gentle on my face even as the kiss turned desperate, like he was terrified of breaking me, like I was something precious instead of just another complication in his complicated world. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. His hands were shaking slightly where they held my face. Mine were trembling where they gripped his shirt. This is a mistake, he whispered against my lips. Probably the worst one I've ever made. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life, who can take you to dinner without checking for snipers, who doesn't wake up screaming from nightmares about the people he's killed. What if I don't want normal? I challenged. What if I want real instead of safe? This is as real as it gets, Amanda. He stepped back, creating distance that felt like abandonment. And that's exactly why we can't do this. Because I will ruin you. I will pull you so deep into darkness that you'll forget what light looks like. And when enemies inevitably come for you, when they hurt you to hurt me, I'll have to live with knowing I caused it. Christopher, go to bed. His voice went cold, controlled, the vulnerability slamming shut behind walls I couldn't breach. We'll pretend this didn't happen. It's better that way. He walked out of his own study, left me there pressed against his bookshelf, lips still tingling, heart still racing. Completely wrecked by a kiss we both knew shouldn't have happened but felt more right than anything in my life. Zeus found me 10 minutes later. The Doberman pressed his weight against my legs, offering comfort without judgment or complications. I slid down to the floor and buried my face in his fur. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something fundamental had shifted between Christopher and me. We'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross, acknowledged feelings that should have stayed buried. And I knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to get infinitely more complicated, because you can't unknow how someone tastes. Can't unfeel the desperation in their touch. Can't pretend you don't want something with every fiber of your being, even when you know it will probably destroy you. 6 weeks after moving into Christopher's fortress, I stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like an inmate. The gilded cage was still a cage no matter how comfortable the bars. I was leaving the clinic at 3 a.m. when everything went wrong. Frank was driving. Same route we always took. Same silent professionalism he always maintained. I was half asleep in the back seat, my head resting against the window, thinking about the chocolate lab I'd just operated on. Bloat. We'd caught it in time. The dog would live. I didn't see the first vehicle until it was too late. Black sedan, no plates. It came out of nowhere and slammed into Frank's side of the SUV. The impact threw me sideways. My seatbelt locked painfully across my chest. The world tilted and spun. Frank was already moving, gun drawn, shouting into his radio. But there were more vehicles now. 2 more sedans boxing us in. Men emerging with weapons that looked military-grade even to my untrained eye. Then Christopher's voice crackled through the radio. He was close. He'd been following in a second vehicle I hadn't known about. Always watching. Always there. The passenger door flew open. Christopher grabbed my arm and hauled me out. His other hand held a gun I'd never seen him carry before. Bigger than I expected. Heavier looking. Stay behind me. Do not move. Do not run. Gunfire erupted. The sound was nothing like movies. Sharper. More violent. It echoed off buildings and car metal and made my ears ring instantly. Christopher fired back. Calm. Methodical. Like this was a Tuesday. Frank was shooting from cover. 2 more of Christopher's men appeared from the follow car. The ambush became a firefight in the middle of an empty avenue. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My veterinary training was screaming about taking cover, about getting small, about protecting vital organs. But my body was frozen. One of the attackers broke from cover, ran toward us. Christopher didn't hesitate. 2 shots, center mass. The man dropped like his strings had been cut. That's when I saw his face. Young, maybe 25. Eyes wide with shock and pain. Blood spreading across his shirt in an obscene bloom of red. Christopher moved forward, stood over him. The man was gasping, trying to speak, begging maybe. I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears and the continued gunfire. Christopher fired once more, point blank. The man stopped moving. I threw up, right there on the asphalt, bent over and heaved until there was nothing left. The firefight ended as suddenly as it started. 4 bodies on the ground. 1 vehicle speeding away into darkness. Sirens in the distance, but Christopher's men were already moving, clearing the scene with practiced efficiency. Amanda. Christopher's hand on my back. We need to go. Now. I let him guide me into another vehicle. Couldn't look at him. Couldn't look at anything except my hands shaking in my lap. There was blood on my shoes, not mine. Splatter from when he'd executed that man 3 feet away from me. The drive back to the estate was silent. Christopher kept glancing at me. I felt his attention but couldn't meet his eyes. Couldn't reconcile the man who'd kissed me in his study with the man who'd just killed someone with the same detachment I used putting down suffering animals. Except that man hadn't been suffering. He'd been begging. And Christopher had ended him anyway. Inside the mansion, Christopher dismissed his men with curt orders. Then he turned to me. Blood spatter on his neck, his shirt torn, a wound bleeding through the fabric at his ribs that he was completely ignoring. "You're hurt," I heard myself say, veterinarian instincts kicking in past the shock. "It's nothing. You're bleeding. Amanda, sit down." I pointed at the nearest chair. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Let me see it." He sat, pulled his shirt off without ceremony. The wound was a graze along his left ribs. Bullet had carved a furrow through skin and muscle. Not deep, but bleeding steadily. I fetched supplies from the medical kit I knew was in every room of this paranoid fortress. My hands shook as I cleaned the wound. Christopher watched me the entire time. Silent. Assessing. "Say it." He finally murmured. "Say what?" "Whatever you're thinking. That I'm a monster. That you want to leave. That you can't look at me without seeing those men die." I pressed too hard with the antiseptic. He didn't flinch. "You executed him." My voice cracked. He was down. He was done. You could have just left him. He would have talked, given descriptions, license plates, everything Bakiri needed to trace us back here. "So you killed him?" "Yes." No apology. No justification beyond cold practicality. Just, yes. I'm a veterinarian. I started wrapping gauze around his torso. I'm used to blood. I've euthanized animals. I understand ending suffering. But that's not what you did. You killed him to protect yourself. To protect me. And you didn't even hesitate. No, I didn't. His hand caught my wrist. Gentle but firm. Because in my world, hesitation gets you killed. Gets the people you care about killed. That man and his friends came to kidnap you. To hurt you. To use you against me. I didn't show mercy because they wouldn't have shown you any. So I'm just supposed to accept that? Accept that people die because of me? People die because of their choices. They chose to come after what's mine. I chose to protect it. His eyes burned into mine. If you want to hate me for that, hate me. But don't pretend you'd rather I'd let them take you. I finished bandaging him in silence. Packed away the supplies. Washed my hands 3 times, trying to scrub away the feeling of his blood under my fingernails. "I need space," I said without looking at him. "No." "Excuse me? You're not leaving my sight until I know Bakiri isn't sending a second team." He stood, muscles flexing under the fresh bandage. "You stay in the main house tonight. Guest room next to my bedroom. Guards outside both doors. I'm not a prisoner. Tonight you are." No anger in his voice, just finality. Because I'm not risking you, not after they got that close. I wanted to argue. Wanted to scream at him that he didn't own me, couldn't control me. couldn't just dictate my life, but the truth was, he could. He did. And we both knew it. The guest room was as luxurious as everything else in this house. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my scrubs, still smelling like antiseptic and gunpowder. Zeus found me there 20 minutes later, pushed his way past the guard, and immediately pressed against my legs. I buried my face in his fur and let myself break. Sobbed into his neck while he stood perfectly still, absorbing my grief and terror like he'd been trained for it. 3 days passed. Christopher increased security to suffocating levels. 4 guards now instead of 2. Routes to the clinic changed daily. Frank had a black eye but insisted he was fine. I stopped asking questions. Christopher's men treated me differently after the ambush. Before, I'd been a complication. Now I saw something else in their eyes. Respect, maybe. Or pity. I'd been blooded. Initiated into the violence they lived with daily. On the 4th day, Christopher called a meeting in his study. 6 men attended. I wasn't invited, but I heard them through the walls. Raised voices, accusations. Someone questioning whether I was worth the risk. Vincent Grimaldi. I'd met him once. Christopher's right-hand man. 40 years old. Cold eyes. Colder demeanor. She's a liability. Vincent's voice carried clearly. Bakiri knows about her. They'll keep coming. How many men do we lose before you admit this is about your ego? Not strategy. Careful. Christopher's voice went deadly quiet. I'm saying what everyone's thinking. You made her a target by showing interest. Now you're weakening our position trying to protect her, send her away, cut her loose, end this. Silence. Then a crash. Something hitting a wall. More voices. Orders barked. When the study door opened, Vincent stormed out, his face twisted with barely controlled rage. He saw me standing in the hallway. His expression promised violence before he walked away. Christopher appeared in the doorway. Blood on his knuckles. Fresh split across Vincent's cheekbone would be my guess. He's wrong, Christopher said. About you being a liability. Is he? I challenged. Because from where I'm standing, people are dying. Your men are getting hurt. All because you fixed my car and I saved your dog. From where I'm standing, you're the first real thing I've had in 15 years. He closed the distance between us. So yes, I'll burn this entire operation down before I let them touch you. Call it ego if you want. Call it weakness. I call it the only thing that makes me feel human anymore. My heart hammered against my ribs. This isn't sustainable. You know that. Then we make it sustainable. We end Bakiri. We finish this war. And we find a way forward that doesn't require you to witness executions or me to choose between you and my people. And if we can't, his hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with heartbreaking gentleness. Then I choose you anyway. Every single time. That night, I understood something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't just trapped in Christopher's world anymore. I was becoming part of it. And the terrifying truth was that part of me didn't want to fight it anymore. 2 months after rear-ending Christopher Pellegrini's SUV, I woke in his bed, not the guest room. His bed. We'd crossed that line 3 nights ago after Vincent's outburst. After Christopher had chosen me over his organization's concerns. After I'd stopped pretending I wanted to leave. The sheets were expensive. Everything in Christopher's life was expensive, but they smelled like him. Cedar and something warmer. And that made them worth more than any price tag could convey. He wasn't there. The space beside me was cold. I found him in his study, shirtless, reading reports with that intense focus he brought to everything. Zeus lifted his head from where he'd been sleeping at Christopher's feet, tail thumping once in greeting. You should still be sleeping, Christopher said without looking up. So should you. It's 5 a.m. Bakiri wants to meet. He set down the papers. Neutral territory. They're proposing a truce. My stomach dropped. It's a trap. Probably. His tone was casual, like discussing weather instead of potential assassination. But I have to go anyway. Show weakness now and this war drags on another year. Then don't go. Send someone else. I don't ask my men to do things I won't do myself. He finally looked at me. Those amber eyes tracked every detail of my face. That's how you keep loyalty, by bleeding alongside them when it matters. I moved around his desk, stood between his legs where he sat. His hands found my hips automatically, pulling me closer. This intimacy was still new, raw. Every touch felt significant in ways I couldn't articulate. When? Tonight. 8 o'clock. Warehouse district. Public enough that outright violence would draw attention. Private enough for real conversation. His thumbs traced circles on my hip bones through the shirt I'd stolen from him. I'll have 20 men positioned within 2 blocks. Another 10 inside. If it goes bad, we're prepared. And if they're more prepared, then you inherit a very complicated estate and several offshore accounts. He said it like a joke. It wasn't. There's a safe in the library. Combination is your birthday. Everything you need is inside. Passports, cash, instructions for... I kissed him to shut him up, hard, desperate. He responded immediately, standing, lifting me onto his desk without breaking contact. Papers scattered. Neither of us cared. When we finally pulled apart, I pressed my forehead against his. You're coming back. Yes. Promise me. Amanda. Promise me, Christopher. His hands cupped my face with heartbreaking gentleness. I promise. I'll come back to you. Always. The day dragged. I went to work. Operated on a cat with a bowel obstruction. Sutured a dog who'd tangled with barbed wire. Mundane emergencies that felt surreal when I kept checking my phone. Counting down hours until Christopher walked into potential ambush. Frank drove me home in silence. He knew. Everyone knew. The entire organization was holding its breath. Christopher left at 7:30. Dark suit, no tie. Gun holstered where I could see it, and at least 2 more I knew he carried hidden. He kissed me at the door, slow and thorough, like memorizing the taste of me. I'll be back by midnight. I watched the convoy disappear down the drive. Then I did what I'd never allowed myself to do before. I went to his study, opened that safe with my birthday as combination, stared at the contents that represented Christopher preparing for his own death. 3 passports with my face and different names. 50,000 in cash. Deeds to properties I'd never heard of. A letter with my name on it in his handwriting. I didn't read it. Couldn't. Reading it felt like accepting he might not come back. Zeus found me there at 9 o'clock, pressed against my legs. We sat on the floor together, him with his head in my lap, me counting minutes and praying to gods I'd stopped believing in when my parents died. The convoy returned at 11:47. I heard the engines. Ran to the window, counted vehicles, all of them accounted for. Christopher emerged from the lead SUV, whole, alive, scanning the grounds with that perpetual vigilance before his eyes found me in the window. The relief almost knocked me over. He came inside, dismissed his men with curt orders, found me standing in the foyer, shaking, tears streaming down my face that I hadn't realized I was crying. Hey, he crossed to me in 3 strides, pulled me against him. I'm here. I'm okay. I promised, didn't I? I hit his chest. Once. Hard. Don't ever do that again. Can't promise that. Then take me with you next time. I'd rather die beside you than wait here wondering if you're already dead. Something in his expression cracked. He kissed me. Fierce. Claiming. Then swept me up and carried me upstairs like I weighed nothing. We made love differently that night. Not the desperate collision of our first times. Slower. More intentional. Like we had time now. Like we'd both stopped pretending this was temporary. Afterward, lying tangled together, he told me about the meeting. Bakiri offered 50-50 split of the port operations. They keep their routes. We keep ours. Peaceful coexistence. What did you say? No. I offered them $2 million to leave entirely. Compensation for whatever investments they'd made. Clean break. They refused? They countered with $3 million and maintained presence. I walked away. His fingers traced patterns on my spine. This doesn't end with compromise. It ends with one of us controlling everything, or both of us destroying each other trying. So we're back where we started. Not quite. He shifted to look at me. They're nervous. Bakiri himself looked older than his file photos. Tired. This war is costing him more than he expected. He'll either escalate soon or fold. We just need to survive whichever choice he makes. I pressed closer to him. Tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone else. Christopher was quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father used to beat my mother. Every night he drank, which was most nights. She'd hide us in the basement. Me, Luca, our older brother Antonio. We'd hear it through the floorboards. The sounds, her crying after. My heart broke. Christopher. When I was 12, I tried to stop him. He broke 3 of my ribs and told me real men don't cry. Antonio was 15. He went after him with a kitchen knife. Father took it away, used it on him instead. Antonio survived, but he was never the same after. Left the family at 18. I haven't seen him in 20 years. That's why you became this. I touched his face, to never feel powerless again. That's why I became a monster. There's a difference. His eyes held mine. I'm not a good man, Amanda. I've killed people who probably didn't deserve it. I've hurt families, destroyed lives, built an empire on suffering I tell myself is necessary, but probably isn't. And yet you rescued animals with Zeus. You protect people under your command. You've never once made me feel unsafe even when I should. Because you're different. How? Because you make me want to be the man I might have been if my father hadn't beaten humanity out of me. He pulled me closer. You make me remember what softness feels like, what trust means, what it's like to care about something more than survival and power. I kissed his jaw, his chin, that scar I'd memorized. Tell me something else. Like what? Like what you want. Not for the organization, not for survival. What do you want for yourself? Christopher was silent again. Then, I want to watch you work in a clinic that's yours. Not the emergency place where you're overworked and underpaid. Your own space. Built exactly how you want it. I want to come home to you every night and not wonder if someone's going to use you to hurt me. I want normal, even though I've never had it and don't know what it looks like. Tears pricked my eyes. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. It's not romantic. It's selfish. I'm asking you to build a life with a man who might die violently any day, who brings danger everywhere he goes, who will never be safe or simple. I don't want safe or simple. I want you. Exactly as you are. Broken parts and all. I kissed him. My parents died when I was 19. I spent 9 years being alone, working until I couldn't feel anything. Surviving but not living. You've made me feel alive again. That's worth more than safety ever could be. He made love to me again. Tender this time. Like I was something precious instead of just desired. And somewhere between heartbeats and gasped breaths and whispered promises, I understood we'd crossed a threshold we couldn't return from. I was his, and he was mine. And whatever came next, we'd face it together. The clinic felt different that night. 3 months after rear-ending Christopher's SUV, 3 months of living in his fortress, and I was suffocating under layers of protection that felt more like burial. I need space, I told him over breakfast. Just a few hours at work without guards hovering, without feeling watched every second. Christopher's jaw tightened. That scar on his chin caught morning light through the windows. No, I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you I can't breathe. My hands shook around my coffee mug. I love you. I've accepted this life, but I need to feel like myself for one night, like a veterinarian. Not your possession. The word landed between us like a grenade. His eyes went dark. Dangerous. But underneath I saw something else. Understanding. Because he'd been caged too, just in different ways. Frank wasn't an option. His doctor had benched him after the concussion, and Christopher refused to pull Rafe off a port run. Vincent volunteered before I could argue. All clipped efficiency and a promise I was too tired to interrogate. I'll keep her in sight, boss. Vincent escorts you. He stays within sight. You don't leave the clinic. 4 hours maximum. He stood, came around the table, tilted my chin up with one finger. And you wear this. He fastened something around my neck. Small pendant. GPS tracker disguised as jewelry. Non-negotiable. I should have argued. Should have recognized the wrongness of Vincent specifically. But I was so desperate for freedom that I missed every warning sign. Vincent drove in silence. He'd barely spoken to me since that fight with Christopher weeks ago, since Christopher had chosen me over organizational concerns. The resentment radiated off him in waves I was too relieved to properly register. The clinic was busy. Saturday night emergencies. A cat who'd eaten lilies, dog with bloat, rabbit with GI stasis, normal problems, fixable problems, problems that had nothing to do with gunfights or territorial wars, or men who killed without hesitation. I lost myself in work, operated on the dog, stabilized the cat, tube-fed the rabbit. For 4 blessed hours, I was Dr. Amanda Wells again, instead of Christopher Pellegrini's weakness. Vincent waited in the parking lot. I saw him through the windows occasionally, leaning against the SUV, on his phone, not watching the perimeter like Frank would have, not scanning for threats with that perpetual vigilance Christopher's men usually maintained. My shift ended at 11. I walked out the back exit, medical bag in hand, already dreading the return to beautiful imprisonment. The parking lot was empty except for Vincent's SUV, and a white van I didn't recognize parked 3 spaces away. Vincent pushed off from the vehicle. "Ready?" Something in his tone was wrong. Too casual, too relaxed. But I was tired, and my guard was down and I didn't process it fast enough. The van doors slid open. 3 men emerged, moving fast, professional. One grabbed me from behind before I could scream. Arm across my throat, hand over my mouth. My medical bag hit the asphalt. I fought, kicked backward, connected with someone's shin, bit down hard on the hand covering my mouth, tasted blood. A sharp pain exploded across the back of my head and everything went sideways. When I could focus again, I was zip-tied to a chair in darkness. Concrete floor, metal walls, the smell of rust and ocean salt. Warehouse, port district maybe. My head throbbed where they'd hit me. Blood dripped down my neck. The pendant Christopher had given me was gone. They'd ripped it off. He'd be tracking empty pavement right now. Vincent walked in. No surprise on his face, no concern, just cold assessment. "You knew." My voice came out raw. "You set this up. Christopher's been weak since you showed up, making decisions based on sentiment instead of strategy." He crouched in front of me. "Bakiri offered me territory, real power. All I had to do was deliver you. He'll kill you for this. He'll try. But Bakiri promised protection. New identity. Enough money to disappear." Vincent stood. "Nothing personal. You're just business. Leverage to end a war." He left. The door clanged shut. Heavy. Final. I tested the zip ties. Tight. Professional grade. My wrists were already losing circulation. The chair was bolted to the floor. No escape there. Time became meaningless. Could have been hours. Could have been minutes. My mind raced through scenarios. Christopher would come. I knew he'd come. But would he be in time? Would Bakiri kill me before negotiations even started? The door opened again. Different man. Albanian accent thick when he spoke. "Your boyfriend receives video now. We give him 24 hours to decide. You or his empire." They filmed me. Made me stare at the camera while someone held a knife to my throat. I refused to beg. Refused to cry. If Christopher saw this, I wanted him to see strength, not fear. After they left, I forced myself to think. Veterinarian training. What did I know? Anatomy, physiology, chemical compounds, tools, my medical bag. They'd taken it but not searched it thoroughly. It sat in the corner. If I could reach it, if I could find something sharp, something useful. Hours passed. A guard came in. Young, maybe 25. He had a dog with him. German shepherd limping badly, whimpering with each step. "Hurt?" I asked in the gentlest voice I could manage. The guard looked at me. Suspicious. Stepped on glass. "Won't stop bleeding." "I'm a veterinarian. I can help, if you let me." He hesitated, then brought the dog closer. The shepherd was clearly in pain. Blood soaking through makeshift bandaging on his front paw. The guard cared about this animal. I could see it. Untie one hand. I need to examine him properly. Another hesitation. Then he cut one zip tie. Blood rushed back into my fingers in painful tingles. I focused on the dog. Gentle exam. Deep laceration. Needed cleaning and stitches. My bag, in the corner, has supplies. He retrieved it. I worked slowly. Cleaned the wound. Numbed it with local anesthetic from my emergency kit. Stitched carefully while the dog stayed remarkably still, trusting. The guard watched every movement. "You're good with him," he said quietly. "All animals deserve care, even in bad situations." I tied off the final stitch, bandaged properly. "Keep it clean. Change the dressing daily. He'll heal." The guard looked at me differently after that. Not friendly, but not quite enemy either. He didn't retie my hand. Just left, taking the dog with him. I waited until his footsteps faded, then moved fast. Found what I needed in my bag. Scalpel blades. Small. Sharp. Hidden in the lining where they hadn't looked carefully. The remaining zip tie came off in minutes. My ankles took longer, but finally I was free. The warehouse was massive. Rusted. Multiple levels. I could hear men talking somewhere above me. At least 4 distinct voices. Maybe more. No way to fight through them. No phone to call for help. I found a corner. Made myself small. And waited. Because I knew Christopher. Knew he wouldn't negotiate. He'd come with violence and fury and every resource at his disposal. The attack began at 4:17 in the morning. I knew the time because someone shouted it when the first explosion rocked the building. Gunfire erupted, screaming. Chaos. I stayed hidden, heart hammering, praying Christopher's men would reach me before Bakiri's decided I was more valuable dead. The door to my room blew inward. I screamed before recognizing the silhouette. Christopher. Covered in blood. Gun in each hand. Eyes wild until they found me. Amanda. I ran to him. Crashed into his chest. His arms came around me, crushing tight while gunfire continued outside. "We need to move. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say." The warehouse was hell. Bodies on the ground. Men fighting hand to hand. The stench of gunpowder and blood thick enough to choke on. Christopher moved through it like a predator. Precise. Lethal. Anyone who got close went down hard. We made it to a side exit. Frank was there, holding position, providing cover. Christopher pushed me toward him. "Get her to the car. Lock down. Don't move until I give the all clear." "Christopher, I'm finishing this." His eyes were black, empty. The man I loved completely absent behind whatever darkness drove him. Bakiri dies tonight. Vincent dies tonight. Anyone who touched you dies tonight. He went back into the warehouse before I could respond. I heard the gunfire intensify. Heard someone screaming. Heard that sharp crack that meant executions, not combat. Frank got me to an armored SUV. Made me lie on the floor. Waited. 20 minutes later, Christopher emerged. Covered in more blood. Dragging Vincent by the collar. Vincent was alive, but barely. Christopher threw him at another man's feet. Said something I couldn't hear. The man nodded. Hauled Vincent away. Then Christopher came to me. Opened the door. Pulled me out. Held me so tight I couldn't breathe. "He's dead. Bakiri's dead. It's over." I clung to him, shaking. "Vincent, we'll wish he died tonight. But death's too quick. Too easy. He betrayed family." Christopher's voice was empty, final. That requires something slower. I didn't ask what he meant. Didn't want to know. Just pressed closer to the only solid thing in a world gone violent. We drove home as dawn broke. Christopher held my hand the entire way. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? I'd been kidnapped. He'd waged war. We'd both survived. But something fundamental had shifted again. I'd seen the absolute depths of what Christopher was capable of, and I'd contributed to my own rescue using skills meant to heal. We were both covered in blood, both changed by violence, both alive when we shouldn't be, and somehow, impossibly, that was going to have to be sufficient foundation for whatever came next. 3 weeks after the warehouse massacre, I woke to find Christopher standing at the window, staring at nothing. The nightmares had started for him. Not every night. but often, he'd wake gasping, reaching for weapons that weren't there, fighting battles that existed only in memory. I never mentioned it, just held him until the trembling stopped, until he remembered where he was, and that the war was finished. The aftermath was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. Vincent's betrayal had exposed cracks in Christopher's organization. Loyalties questioned, alliances tested. 3 more men were removed quietly, their treachery discovered too late to prevent damage, but early enough to stop total collapse. I didn't ask what happened to them. Some questions had answers I didn't want living in my head. The Bikiri syndicate had fractured after their leader's death. Some scattered back to Europe. Others tried negotiating with Christopher for scraps of territory. He showed no mercy. Within 2 weeks, the Albanian presence in the city had been completely erased. Christopher consolidated power with ruthless efficiency that should have terrified me. It didn't. Not anymore. I'd seen too much. Become too complicit. Crossed too many lines to pretend moral superiority. But the physical recovery was easier than the psychological. My wrists healed where zip ties had cut circulation. The concussion faded. Bruises yellowed and disappeared. My body returned to normal while my mind struggled to reconcile who I'd been with who I was becoming. Christopher never left my side those first weeks. Canceled meetings, delegated responsibilities, just stayed. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. His presence was enough. Solid. Real. Proof that we'd both survived. On the 3-week anniversary of my kidnapping, I made a decision. I'm going back to work. Christopher looked up from his breakfast, studied me with those amber eyes that saw too much. You sure? I need to feel useful, normal, like myself again. I reached across the table, took his hand. I can't stay locked in this house waiting for the next threat. That's not living. That's just existing. He nodded slowly. Security stays. Frank drives you. 2 guards minimum. Non-negotiable. I know. I did know. Would always know. This was the price of loving him. But I need this. Please. Then you'll have it. His thumb traced my knuckles. But not the emergency clinic. Somewhere else. Christopher. I bought the building on Maple Street. 3,000 square feet. Zoned for veterinary practice. It's yours. Set it up however you want. Hire who you need. I'll fund everything. I stared at him. You bought me a clinic? I bought you freedom. Within limits. Within protection. But freedom. He stood. Came around the table. Crouched beside my chair. You've given up everything for me. Your independence. Your safety. Your entire life. Let me give you something back. Let me give you the career you deserve. Tears blurred my vision. That's the second most romantic thing you've ever said to me. What was the first? That you'd burn your empire for me. His hand cupped my face. I would. I will. If it ever comes to that choice again, you win. Every single time. 3 months later, I stood in my clinic. My clinic. With my name on the door. Dr. Amanda Wells, DVM. Specializing in emergency care and rescue rehabilitation. The space was exactly what I'd imagined. Modern equipment, surgical suite that rivaled hospitals, comfortable waiting area, office where I could actually do paperwork without feeling like I was suffocating in someone else's space. Christopher had spared no expense, but he'd also respected every choice I'd made. Hadn't tried controlling the design or hiring, just provided resources and stepped back. I hired 3 technicians and a receptionist. Good people with solid experience who didn't ask too many questions about why 2 armed guards were always present. The neighborhood learned quickly that this veterinarian had protection. No one bothered us. No one dared. The work saved me. Saved us. Gave me purpose beyond being Christopher Pellegrini's weakness. I was a veterinarian again. Healing animals. Saving lives. Making a difference in ways that had nothing to do with organized crime. Christopher would visit sometimes. Usually late. After his own work finished. He'd sit in my office and watch me do paperwork. Zeus at his feet. Content just being near me. You're happy here, he observed one night. I am. I looked up from inventory lists. Thank you. For understanding what I needed. You've changed me, Amanda. Made me want things I never thought possible. Normalcy. Peace. A life that isn't just violence and survival. He paused. Marry me. The question stunned me into silence. Not because you're obligated. Not because you're in too deep to leave. Because I love you. Because I can't imagine waking up without you beside me. Because you're the only good thing I've ever created. He pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple. Elegant. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Marry me and make me believe I'm worth redemption. Yes. The word came out choked by tears. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring on my finger. Perfect fit. Like everything with us. Unlikely. Complicated. Absolutely right. The wedding happened 4 months after my kidnapping. Small ceremony in Christopher's gardens. Maybe 30 people. His remaining trusted men. A few of my co-workers who'd become friends. Dr. Reeves cried when she hugged me. The kind of fierce, relieved tears only people from the night shift understand. I slipped an envelope into her hand later. The first donation to the hardship fund she'd always wanted for Tex. Anonymous, I said. She didn't ask from who. No family for either of us. We were both orphans in different ways. I wore champagne silk. Not white. White felt dishonest given everything we'd done, everything we'd become. Christopher wore a dark suit. No tie. His gun conspicuously absent for the first time I'd witnessed. The vows were simple, traditional. We promised forever, knowing forever in our world had no guarantees. Promised faithfulness, while acknowledging we'd both killed to protect what we had. Promised love despite understanding love for us meant something darker, more complicated than normal people experienced. When Christopher kissed me as his wife, Zeus barked once. Approval from the dog who'd brought us together. The reception lasted hours. Men I knew had killed, for Christopher toasted our happiness with genuine warmth. I danced with my husband, while guards watched the perimeter, and the sunset painted everything gold. That night, in his bed that was now our bed, Christopher traced the line of my spine with careful fingers. I never thought I'd have this. Have what? Peace. Someone who knows exactly what I am and stays anyway. A future that looks like more than just surviving the next war. He pressed his lips to my shoulder. Thank you for choosing me, for not running when you had the chance. I never had a choice. I rolled to face him. Not really. You've been it since that night in the rain, since you stepped out of that SUV and looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting even when I was nobody. You were never nobody. You saved Zeus. That made you everything. 6 months later, I woke to nausea that wouldn't quit. Christopher knew before I did. Had already called his doctor. Already prepared himself for the news that changed everything again. You're pregnant, the doctor confirmed. About 8 weeks. Christopher's hand found mine immediately. Squeezed so tight it hurt. When the doctor left, he pulled me against him and just held me. Silent. Shaking slightly. Are you afraid? I asked. Terrified. This world, this life. It's not safe for children. I've made enemies who would use our child to destroy us. Who would hurt something innocent just to hurt me. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. But I want this. Want to give them everything I never had. Love. Security. The choice to be different than me. They'll be both of us. Your strength and my compassion. Your intelligence and my stubbornness. I placed his hand on my still flat stomach. We'll protect them. Together, like we've protected each other. The pregnancy progressed. Christopher became impossibly more protective. Guards tripled. Routes to the clinic varied constantly. He accompanied me to every appointment, every ultrasound, sitting beside me and staring at grainy images of our growing child with wonder that made him seem younger. The clinic thrived. I cut back hours but continued working. Christopher expanded the building, added a wing specifically for rescue rehabilitation, funded entirely by legitimate investments he'd been building. Money washed clean through businesses that actually existed, actually produced value. He was changing. Slower than I wanted sometimes, but undeniably different. Less quick to violence, more thoughtful about consequences. The man I'd met 9 months ago wouldn't have hesitated to kill someone who disrespected him. The man I was married to now counted costs beyond just tactical advantages. Zeus remained constant through everything. The Doberman had fully recovered, moved with that powerful grace I'd first admired. He'd become our protector, slept outside our bedroom, followed me everywhere when Christopher couldn't, seemed to understand the responsibility of guarding not just me now, but the life growing inside me. At 28 weeks pregnant, exhausted from a long shift, I found Christopher in the nursery he'd created, painting, a mural of stars and moon on the ceiling, his hands covered in silver paint, expression more relaxed than I'd ever seen it. "You're painting." He looked over his shoulder, smiled that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Thought they'd like looking at something beautiful when they can't sleep. I moved behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist as much as my pregnant belly allowed. "I love you. So much it scares me sometimes." "I know." He turned in my embrace, placed both hands on my stomach. Our daughter kicked against his palm. His expression went soft, vulnerable. She's going to have everything: safety, education, the choice to be whatever she wants. Doctor, artist, anything but this life. She'll choose her own path, just like we did. Our path nearly killed us both multiple times. But we survived. We're here. We're building something real. I kissed him. That's more than most people can say. That night, lying together with Zeus at the foot of our bed, Christopher's hand resting protective on my swollen belly, I thought about the 9 months since I'd rear-ended his SUV in the rain. 9 months that had contained a lifetime of violence and love and transformation. I'd lost my independence, my anonymity, my safety, but I'd gained a husband who'd kill for me without hesitation. A home built on loyalty and blood. A future I'd never imagined wanting. I'd chosen this, chose him, chose a life where danger was constant, but love was absolute. And despite everything, despite all the darkness, I'd choose it again, every single time.